At my late husband's funeral, my in-laws returned after 8 years, demanding control of our company and house as his biological parents. Recently, I, a 34-year-old woman, lost my 38-year-old spouse to leukemia. After 10 years of dating and 8 years of marriage, we were business and life partners. As I deal with an unforeseen circumstance that arose at his funeral, I am still trying to digest everything. 5 years ago, my husband received a leukemia diagnosis. In recent months, his condition dramatically worsened despite intensive treatment. He stayed committed to our plastic recycling company, which we started from the beginning, despite his illness. He would video call me to talk about operations and future plans, even from his hospital bed. He was committed and progressive all the way to the end, and that was simply who he was. His funeral last week was where the real trouble started. I was surprised to see my brother-in-law, 40, and my in-laws, both 65 there. After a major falling out over our business endeavor, they had not spoken to us for 8 years. They had consistently given preference to my brother-in-law, treating my husband as though he were somehow less deserving of their care and assistance. They made a concerted effort to dissuade my husband when we first started our firm, saying he was simply mimicking his brother, who had announced a similar initiative. However, this was after we had already completed our market research and started establishing our business. I remained calm and kept my distance from them during the funeral service. But when the majority of people had left, my in-laws came up to me and said they had important things to talk about. At first, people tried to seem understanding by offering their sympathies and inquiring about my husband's last days. I responded succinctly, recalling that they were aware of his health but never paid him a visit during his illness. Then their real motivations became apparent. They began discussing proper inheritance and family responsibilities. To my surprise, they insisted that I give them full control of our company, saying that my brother-in-law could help them run it more effectively. They changed their strategy and demanded our house after I adamantly refused. Their justification was especially offensive. They said that a widow without children didn't require such a large house and that they could make more money by renting out their current residence. Their boldness left me speechless. My husband and I had planned our future together, and this was the house we had created. We have recollections of our lives together in every nook and cranny. It seemed as though they were attempting to obliterate our entire history with their demand. They got combative, threatening legal action and asserting their rights as his parents when I told them that this was not happening at all. They are unaware that my spouse had prepared for this possibility because he thought it might occur. He made a video addressing his parents in particular a month prior to his death. If they ever attempted to seize his assets after his passing, he wanted me to play it for them. I now see why he believed it was important, even if at the time I thought he was being too careful. I have yet to play the video for them. I drove home crying after they threatened me at the funeral, and I didn't think about it until I was by myself in our house. I need to gather my strength before I confront them with the contents of the tape, even though I know it will change everything. I'm concentrating on managing our company for the time being, as my husband and I had intended. He ensured that all the legal documentation was in order at the time of his initial diagnosis. Even though I know I'm right, their demands and threats are making an already unbearably difficult period emotionally taxing for me. I'm having a lot of trouble deciding when to show them the video. A part of me is eager to get it over with, and another part of me wants to wait until they really attempt to file a lawsuit. In any case, I am aware that this is not yet finished. My in-laws' treatment of my spouse throughout his life is painfully recalled by the current circumstance. I observed the glaring disparity in their treatment of their boys when we initially began dating in our mid-20s. Despite his troubles with alcohol and his incapacity to maintain a job, they believed that my brother-in-law could do no wrong. My husband, on the other hand, who put in a great deal of effort at work and always attempted to support his family, was only criticized and dismissed. The last straw for me was a specific Christmas dinner almost 8 years ago. Instead of celebrating the fact that we had just landed our first significant contract for our recycling firm, my in-laws spent the entire evening disparaging our endeavor in comparison to my brother-in-law's comparable business concept. It's important to note that after learning of our achievement, he quickly came up with his strategy. A furious dispute broke out during the dinner when my father-in-law said my husband was overly ambitious and needed to know his place. We didn't really communicate with them again after that. My husband finally understood that their toxic behavior would never change, even though he had always sought their praise despite my advice to advocate for himself. Their total absence during my husband's illness is what makes their current actions even more egregious. We didn't deliberately conceal his leukemia diagnosis from them. Even though they must have been aware of how bad his situation was, they never once inquired about it, sought out, or expressed any desire in getting back together, even though the news had traveled through family connections and they lived in the same city. Over the past 5 years, we have solely concentrated on expanding our company and helping one another during his medical treatment. 3 states had taken notice of our plastic recycling firm, and we were even highlighted in a number of environmental business periodicals. Even on his hardest days in the hospital, my husband would light up when we discussed our most recent projects or our goals for future growth because he was so pleased with what we had created together. His final month of life was especially challenging. When he realized he was running out of time, he started organizing things very methodically. He recorded that video message for his parents, reorganized all of our business records, and revised his will. I recall the day he took the recording. Despite being in his hospital room, he insisted on wearing his favorite business outfit because he was having one of his best days. He handled things with remarkable composure, far more so than I did. He warned me that day, "They'll try to take everything we built, not because they need it, but because they never believed in me. Within ourselves. They will want to demonstrate that they were correct all along." He forced me to make a commitment to maintain my ground and defend the things we had created together, including our shared dream as well as our worldly possessions. I've only seen the video message he taped that day once, but it's really impactful. He talks about all the years of partiality, the contemptuous remarks, and the occasions when they choose to believe in his brother rather than him. But in its clarity, it is painful, honest, and unvarnished. It is neither furious nor bitter. He also talks about me, how everything we created together was intended to remain just that, ours, and how I was ultimately the only family he truly had. I received a string of progressively hostile texts from my in-laws the day following the altercation at the burial. They asserted that they were morally entitled to his legacy since they were his parents. Totally ignoring their own part in the alienation, they even implied that I had somehow coerced their son into removing them from his life. I had stolen their son and was now stealing his legacy, and their most recent mail threatened to expose this. My spouse had painstakingly documented everything, which made their threats all the more ridiculous. Every significant choice pertaining to our company was decided upon collaboratively and documented appropriately. All of our accomplishments were the result of years of diligence, forethought, and commitment, exactly the traits his parents had disregarded in him all of his childhood. I came upon a picture from our first business meeting last night while perusing some old pictures at his home office. Sitting at our small leased office space with our first recycling machine, we were so youthful and full of hope. My husband's parents had refused to assist, claiming it was a silly dream, so he had taken out a personal loan to purchase that equipment. By transforming that one machine into a cutting-edge operation with more than 50 employees, we disproved their claims. He had preserved some old emails, including ones from his parents, which I also found. It was like witnessing their relationship fall apart in slow motion as you read through them. Their criticism made every accomplishment seem less significant, and every accomplishment was compared to his brother. In fact, they accused him of wanting to eclipse his brother by launching our company in their most recent email, which was sent 8 years ago. Ironically, they never believed in his legacy when he was alive, but now they say they deserve it. They never paid us a visit, never acknowledged our accomplishments, and never showed any curiosity about what we had constructed. They didn't get in touch, even after our creative recycling technique was highlighted in the local media. However, now that he's gone, they feel the need to take possession of all he put so much effort into creating. They want to challenge the will, according to their most recent threat, which they got this morning. They say they have proof that I had an undue effect on my husband in his last days. It's nearly absurd. He was more focused and resolute than ever in those last days. He made sure that everything was legally guaranteed because he knew exactly what he wanted. My in-laws have no case, according to the legal team at our company, with whom I have been talking. My husband's will is unambiguous and compliant with the law, and everything is appropriately recorded. Additionally, they have encouraged me to preserve all correspondence from my in-laws because their threatening comments can prove helpful in the event that this goes to court. When they unexpectedly arrived at our corporate headquarters yesterday, it was their most recent attempt at intimidation. Demanding to address the board of directors, they created quite a stir in the lobby. It's still the family business we started together, and we don't even have a board. They yelled that they would expose the truth about how their kid was coerced out of his family before our security team had to escort them out. The most agonizing aspect of it all is seeing them destroy their own son's legacy in an effort to seize what he created. My spouse finally realized that nothing he accomplished would ever be good enough after years of attempting to gain their favor. He ultimately found serenity in embracing that and concentrating on our shared life. Everything will be different because of the video he left behind. In addition to addressing their recent attempts to seize his money, he also directly addresses their years of favoritism and emotional manipulation. Speaking with the same quiet strength he often displayed in business meetings, he taped it while sitting in his hospital room in his finest suit on one of his final lucid days. I'm going to their house tomorrow to show them the footage. I've come to the conclusion that waiting any longer is pointless. They must know precisely where they are and why. My husband planned for their behavior since he knew them well enough to anticipate it. It's time for them to hear his parting speech. Just in case things go out of hand, I've already made plans for our lawyer to be available tomorrow. This video's content goes beyond simply criticizing their most recent actions. It provides a thorough description of how they treated him over the course of his life, including particular incidents and dates. Even in this, he was meticulous. The thing that most amazes me about this whole situation is exactly what my spouse predicted it would be. He was aware that they would want to take credit for the things we created together, not because they were proud of them but more because they would never be able to believe that he was successful without their help. He knew that, like they had done during his life, they would attempt to discredit his decisions even after he passed away. The irony is that things may have turned out differently if they had even a small amount of interest in his life during his leukemia battle. However, they made the decision to remain silent throughout his entire sickness, never contacting him or inquiring about his health. They now have the audacity to assert ownership of what he and I jointly constructed. I'm not only defending our company and our house, I'm defending his legacy, our common goal, and the real him. Not the son they rejected, but the intelligent, compassionate, and driven man who created something significant in spite of their lack of belief in him. They will finally hear his final words to them tomorrow, and they will see why their allegations are unfounded. I'm currently fortifying myself and getting ready for the future. As he would have desired, the business is still thriving, and his parents will soon, very soon, find out precisely how their son felt about their unexpected interest in his legacy. Update 1. I wanted to share some updates from my last post, which was a week ago. Despite the huge emotional toll of losing my husband and coping with his parents' threats, I'm lucky to have an amazing support network. To assist me cope with this new reality, my parents have temporarily moved in with me. Although he still works, my father has taken up all of my husband's practical responsibilities, including food shopping, housework, and bill payment. I've never been good at remembering to buy necessities. Since our housekeeper just resigned for personal reasons, my mother has been handling the cooking and cleaning. Unbeknownst to me, their presence has been a blessing. Concentrating on my profession has become essential to me. The fantastic team my husband and I created together is primarily responsible for the efficient operation of our company today. Throughout this trying time, they have demonstrated amazing loyalty and support. During our management meeting last week, a number of longtime staff members related how my husband had aided their professional development. Hearing these recollections was both touching and devastating. But sometimes I'm hit hard by the fact that he's not here. His coffee mug was still on the desk, just where he left it on his last day of work, and I almost lost it when I was in his office yesterday trying to find some paperwork. I miss the little things we used to do together. Like having coffee in the morning, talking about company plans, taking lunch together, and even jokingly arguing about how to organize files. The ongoing fear of legal action from my in-laws is what makes things more difficult. Yesterday, their attorney got in touch with our legal team and made nebulous claims regarding familial rights and undue influence. Even though our attorneys told me that these accusations are unfounded, dealing with these attacks during a time of grief is nonetheless extremely taxing. Our clients' and business partners' support has been tremendous. Several people have expressed their confidence in my abilities to continue running the company, and many have written poignant letters about their experiences working with my spouse. It means a lot, especially in light of my in-laws' attempts to cast doubt on my competence to manage the company. In part to keep myself occupied and in part to make sure everything keeps going well, I've been putting in more hours at the office. Our environmental impact objectives have always been very important to my spouse, and I'm committed to upholding and advancing his vision. He was very enthusiastic about a project we are now discussing. The opening of a new recycling center in a neighboring state. Through it all, my parents have been incredible. One of them is always available if I need assistance thanks to the rotation system they have set up. In an attempt to better understand my day-to-day existence, my mother has even begun to study about how our firm is run. In order to filter out any efforts at communication from my in-laws, Dad has been taking care of all the incoming mail and phone calls. Coming home to our residence every evening is the most difficult part. Every room has memories, and without him, it can feel impossible at times. However, I'm making an effort to put more emphasis on my appreciation for the 10 years we had together than on the future we lost. Grief is the cost of love, as my mother always reminds me, and my spouse was worth every cry. Update 2. My in-laws decided to challenge the will 2 weeks ago. Our lawyer told me about the formal proceedings during our recent meeting. Even though we're not overly concerned about the result, dealing with this pointless legal dispute at this already trying time is aggravating. Now my in-laws have changed their strategy. They tried to scare me with their alleged plan in an email they sent me yesterday. They said they were entitled to everything since they were his flesh and blood, and that my attempt to scare them away with the video, which I haven't even shown them yet, wouldn't work. They even went so far as to declare that they no longer only came for the property. They now feel entitled to shares in the company. Fortunately, courts do not function according to what individuals believe they are entitled to. The communication actually thrilled my lawyer, who said it would be helpful proof of their objectives. I sent all of this information to our legal staff, who are constructing a more compelling argument against their assertions. All of this has been made possible by my parents' tremendous support. In the hopes that they could react better to a different set of parents, they even offered to speak with my in-laws, but I turned them down. I want them to proceed with their case at this point because I am certain that it will be a complete waste of their time and money, which is precisely what I desire given their actions. The last several weeks have been hectic, with a steady flow of people coming to see how I'm doing or to express condolences since they were unable to make it to the service. I've hardly had time to think about my own emotions because I've been so busy taking care of business and entertaining myself. However, I nearly lost it the other day while I was in my husband's office trying to find some documents pertaining to my job. I only hoped I could speak to him again, to express my love and miss him, because I could picture him there so vividly. My top priority right now is making sure our company keeps growing. I am aware that he would have preferred that. His drive has inspired me to put in even more effort. Even on the most difficult days, I am motivated to keep going by his vision for the success of our business. With all the paperwork my husband left behind, our legal team is confident in our position. Responses to any possible allegations of undue influence or family rights have already been drafted. Everyone involved in the issue understands the irony of my in-laws attempting to assert any rights after 8 years of total silence. It's touching to see how many lives my husband affected, and my mother has taken to arranging all of the messages and condolence cards we've received. His honesty and inventiveness in the field have been documented by colleagues, business associates, and even rivals. My in-laws' present attempts to portray him as someone who was coerced out of his family are in sharp contrast to these testimonies. The most challenging aspect is keeping my cool during this entire ordeal. Whether it's another threatening email from my in-laws or just the agony of missing him, there are fresh hurdles every day. But I'm committed to preserving everything we created together, not only for me, but also for his legacy. Our senior management team and I will be meeting tomorrow to talk about our expansion plans, which my husband was really looking forward to before he became ill. Even as we navigate these legal obstacles, it feels good to be pursuing his aspirations. I plan to prove him correct when he says that the best form of retaliation is success. Update 3. 2 weeks have passed since my in-laws challenged the will, and yesterday something really intriguing occurred. My brother-in-law, of all people, sent me a note. I was taken aback because we have absolutely nothing to discuss, and it seemed brave of him to get in touch with me considering what his parents are doing. We're absolutely not on terms where we can text each other casually, and we've never been very close. He texted me to ask if he could come over to my house. Something compelled me to give it a shot even though my first reaction was to decline and block his phone. I felt it had something to do with my in-laws, and I had a gut sense this might be significant. I also agreed to meet him because my parents would be home. He brought flowers and offered his condolences when he came, explaining that the circumstances with his parents had prevented him from expressing them appropriately during the burial. This wasn't the kind of behavior I expected, therefore I was surprised by how considerate it was. He had always struck me as being rather noisy and conceited in our past encounters at family get-togethers. Even more unexpectedly, he no longer had the same alcoholic odor as he had years before. His performance appeared to have been thoroughly cleaned up. He rambled on for a while before getting to the subject. He was there to inform me that his parents intended to discredit me and it would not be a pleasant experience. They were making up a story about how I was now rejecting their assertion that my husband had borrowed money from them to launch our company. They intended to spread their lies on social media as they were unable to legally pursue this angle due to the lack of a legally binding contract. I couldn't understand why they believed it would work because it was such a naive plan. But I was glad he came to alert me so I could take preventative action. Then he revealed something more intimate. He had been trying to improve himself over the last few years and had made multiple attempts to get in touch with us. But he lacked the bravery to do so after mistreating his brother for years. He knew it was too late, but now he was here to make amends for everything. I was totally unprepared when he actually began to cry. He was comforted by my father, who was there and prepared him a cup of tea to help him relax. I reassured him that everything would be alright and that I was certain his brother would have valued his gesture when he eventually left. He felt somewhat better as a result of this. In all honesty, I don't believe he was responsible for most of what transpired. Both of his children were let down by their parents. By treating him as the golden child, they believed they were doing him a favor, but in the end, they did neither of their kids any favors and instead spoiled him. I simply feel sorry for them both. They were entitled to better lives and better parents. My viewpoint on this whole situation has changed as a result of my brother-in-law's visit. Both boys were obviously impacted by the poisonous familial dynamics, albeit in different ways. His sibling is just now starting to see the harm their parents inflicted, while my husband found the strength to escape and start a new life. Update 4. After talking to my lawyer, I informed him of what my brother-in-law had told us. In order to use my in-laws' social media posts against them in court, we agreed to wait and see how things would develop. Our legal staff verified that having my brother-in-law testify against his parents would strengthen our case, and he even offered to do so if needed. My in-laws finally posted on social media a few days ago. I emailed them right away to warn them that we would take legal action and file a defamation case if they didn't remove it right away. They probably didn't anticipate such a prompt and stern reaction. When I told them that their own son was now on our side, it probably didn't boost their confidence. Almost instantly, they removed the message, but they insisted in their reply that they would take everything away from me. Their actions have now become nearly monotonous. I blocked their email address and wished them luck with their goals. They can do whatever they want, but now that my brother-in-law, their lone possible ally, is no longer on their side, they will need that luck. I am aware of the irony of the entire situation. They are now frantically striving to leverage family ties they themselves broke years ago in an attempt to obtain a share of the company they once wrote off as a silly dream. All of our legal records, their prior actions, and now the testimony of their own kid all point against them. Our attorneys are optimistic that this will shortly come to an end. They are aware that they are in a precarious position because they promptly took down their defamatory message after being threatened with legal action. Everyone concerned is realizing more and more that they have no case, either morally or legally. Knowing that my spouse was correct all along is what makes me the happiest, not the possibility of winning in court. He diligently prepared for the possibility that they would do something similar. Because of the legal measures he took and the video he left behind, he is still defending what we created together. Our company is still doing very well, and we are proceeding with the plans for growth that my husband was really enthusiastic about. Our clients have been understanding during this entire process, and the team is still very supportive. Honoring his legacy by carrying on with the dream we both shared is ultimately what counts. Now and then, my brother-in-law calls to see how I'm doing. Our family dynamics have changed in a little but significant way. It's never too late for people to own up to their mistakes and make an effort to improve, even though it's too late to save certain relationships. My husband has always had that belief, and I'm beginning to understand why. I am aware that I still have difficult days ahead of me, both personally and professionally, but I am also ready for whatever comes next. That was my husband's responsibility, and I plan to honor him by preserving and expanding everything we created together. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. Dad favored my sister but was rejected. I chose my brother to walk me down the aisle and witnessed karma hit him hard. Dad wanted to take my sister down the aisle first, but she chose our stepdad, so he declined to walk me down the aisle. Dad is crying now and pleading with me to let him. Although I've never been a particularly vindictive person, I do enjoy it when karma is presented in a palpable manner, which is what has occurred. I don't care if that makes me a bad person or a lousy daughter. I couldn't be happier or more arrogant about the whole thing. After years and years of pain and emotional abuse, I am overjoyed to have finally seen justice. My father has made me feel awful as I've grown up. He suddenly remembers this daughter of his that he never really liked in the first place, now that he has no one else to rely on. Out of my 3 siblings, I, F31, am the middle one. Sarah, F29, is my younger sister, and Finley, Finn, M37, is my older brother. We were a happy family for the majority of my upbringing. At least my mom, F59, did her best to be an equal parent, even though my parents had their preferences. My father, M65, is not in the same boat. Favoritism was clearly visible in his actions. His favorite person was Sarah, and since Finn was the son, he naturally felt a connection with him and they could bond over man things. I was, of course, left out of this dynamic. It began at a very young age. I've always had the impression that my father didn't think highly of me. I made a few attempts to express it, maybe by throwing fits because I was a challenging kid overall, But nothing I ever did got his attention. As I grew older, I came to terms with it. I believe Mom tried to make up for his partiality after noticing it. Because I would have remained invisible my entire life if it had been up to my father, I have always adored her for seeing me. Mom did her best to be an equitable parent, but as I mentioned, she was not flawless. She treated us the same and loved us equally. I believe Finn noticed that she made an effort to keep me from feeling excluded. He attempted to fill in after noticing my neglect and my tendency to be distant. When Finn was learning how to change automobile tires, he would ask Dad if I could come along. When Dad taught him how to drive, he made sure I was present. Dad didn't involve me in the chats, so I know it was him. I didn't experience abuse or anything similar. We received similar gifts if they gave them to us. For example, I received as many new outfits as either Sarah or Finn. However, Dad never provided me with any emotional support. Mom and Finn attempted to fill that void in my life for all that time. Sarah, on the other hand, simply enjoyed playing the role of the young princess. She was a snobby child, and her attitude caused her school to raise various concerns. In some way, all of those worries were ignored. She developed into a very demanding and conceited young lady. I am not really close to her as a result. I'm really close to Finn, and he simply can't bear Sarah. Dad is the only one who does not find her behavior problematic. Mom barely puts up with her either. This is the current situation. Mom and Dad split about a decade ago. We have all been kept in the dark about the true reason for the friendly breakup. We all know that Mom and Dad's claim that they are no longer compatible is untrue. Something else is the true cause. Since none of them began dating someone new for a long period after the divorce, I am very sure it wasn't infidelity. We all still don't know the truth, and Mom and Dad have always wanted to keep it that way. There was no custody issue to deal with because we were all adults at the time. Since then, they've generally gotten along well. Since, let's face it, there's no love lost there, I have personally opted to avoid seeing Dad as much as possible. I suppose it works for both of us because he hasn't voiced any complaints about my absence. When I have free time, I usually visit Mom's house, although Finn and Sarah split their time equally between the two locations. We never go with Sarah unless it's for Christmas, but Finn and I occasionally plan our trips to Mom's house. Finn simply cannot tolerate her. When viewed from the outside, we appear to be rather normal and functional. But for once, I am glad that things have taken a turn for the worse. Mom began dating Arthur, M60, 5 years ago. They clicked right away after meeting at a yoga retreat. My time with Arthur is enjoyable, and he is a cool guy. He never tries to push limits and is kind to Finn and myself. Since nobody has ever mentioned it and I don't see any justification for him to treat Sarah badly, I'm going to presume that everything is well between them. All that matters is that Mom is happy. Even though Dad is very combative with Arthur, they have a friendly relationship. I believe it's because Dad doesn't have a steady partner and his dating life hasn't been very successful. In addition, Mom's life is opulent in comparison to her life with Dad, and Arthur makes a lot more money than Dad does. We are all pleased for Mom, but I believe Dad is really resentful of the whole thing. The fact that we get along well with Arthur is another thing he dislikes. Dad still acts envious despite Finn's attempts to explain that none of us are taking his place and that we are simply acting like responsible adults in this scenario. All of it is very offensive and childish. Fortunately, since I don't see Dad very often, I don't have to deal with a lot of it. The dynamics of the family are as follows at the moment. Understanding the backdrop is crucial to comprehending the events of the past few days. My fiancée, Kieran, M34, proposed to me a few months ago. We've spent a lot of time together. I prefer to stay private, therefore I didn't make the engagement public right away. After choosing the date, Kieran and I informed our families since we wanted to get married as soon as possible and avoid a lengthy engagement period. 1 week from now, the wedding is planned. My family's response when I told them was conflicted. Arthur was pleased, and Finn and Mom were ecstatic. Sarah appeared pretty unhappy, but Dad's response was fairly neutral. All of this took place during a video call, and I could see that she quickly ended the call after forcing a grin. She detests not being the center of attention, so I was expecting some sort of tantrum, but at that moment, I couldn't stand her theatrics. I informed Finn that I wanted him to be the one to escort me down the aisle, not Dad, and I called him separately to gossip. He remained silent for a time and claimed that although he was deeply moved by my request, he believed it was improper to fulfill and that Dad would make a big deal out of it. He claimed that although he would really like to, he was unable to do so since he didn't want to annoy his father. He said something that hurt me. He understood that I needed him to be there with me since he had been my male protector far more than Dad, and I informed him that I had come to him because I had been let down by Dad on multiple occasions. I hate to say it, But I also felt Finn was making sense, so I didn't argue with him about it. It was an emotional conversation. Gently, he assured me that it didn't matter if he escorted me down the aisle. It was crucial that my day be as uneventful as possible so that I could look back on it with joy and no resentment. If he were to assume Dad's position, he claimed, Dad would remain agitated during the ceremony and spoil the day and the memories for me. He was correct. I knew what Finn said would make my day simpler, if not perfect, and Dad was more than capable of pulling off such a ruse. Finn advised me to discuss it with Dad. I stated I would give it some thought and that I was hesitant to have him escort me down the aisle. Fortunately, Sarah and her boyfriend Zach announced their engagement 2 weeks later. After exchanging glances with Kieran, I knew she would try to steal the show at my wedding or do something else, but I couldn't help myself. Finn was also not very pleased. We were both aware of the timing, but we were unable to change it, so we kept quiet. One positive outcome of this is that Sarah's wedding is scheduled for approximately 5 weeks from now, 1 month after mine. The stars didn't align in her favor, so she had to be content to be the second bride in the family, even though she had really wanted to marry before me. I resisted her attempts to guilt me into delaying my wedding, even though she was rather sour about it. She needed to grow up since I wasn't the type to give in to her whims. Thus, things remained unchanged. But it seems that Dad and Sarah agreed that he would accompany her down the aisle before he did the same for me. I'm not really sure how they came up with something that strange. Since I never had much luck with boys in school or college, I suppose they figured I wouldn't get married or would get married later. In any case, once Sarah announced her engagement, I requested Dad to accompany me down the aisle. He sadly informed me that he had promised his baby that he would accompany her first. Years ago, while she was on her deathbed, which never materialized, he said he had made that commitment. Now, he wouldn't be able to lead me down the aisle because he couldn't break his word and break her heart. To be honest, I was thrilled because I didn't want him to accompany me down the aisle in the first place. I was dancing within as I feigned sadness and hurt. I assured him that even if it hurt, it didn't, I would accept his vow to Sarah because I respected it. I called Finn right away and informed him of the situation. He was upset with his father. Finn stated that he would have seized the chance to accompany me down the aisle immediately if he had known Dad would act in this manner. He said that I could choose whatever daughter I wanted to grant this privilege to if Dad could. I was too delighted to care if Finn was upset with Dad. In the end, it had turned out to be just what I had desired, and I am overjoyed. Despite the pressure of wedding planning, everything was going smoothly. Up until yesterday, when unheard of drama entered my life, drama for which I lacked the stamina, everything looked to be in order, despite my jitteriness and nervousness. Sarah told her father last night that he would not be accompanying her to the wedding. She requested Arthur to do it instead. We were all surprised by this. Not only that, she announced it via video call. She could have been more tactful about it, and it was cruel. We were all aware of Dad's excitement for her wedding. Because she and her fiancé wanted to save money for the honeymoon, he had even covered the entire cost. Dad had nearly mentally checked out of my life, and Mom and Dad were busy organizing 2 weddings. Since all of his attention was on Sarah, he had nothing to contribute or recommend and continued to show no interest in anything pertaining to my wedding. Furthermore, he had not made any financial contributions to my wedding. We were paying for it ourselves, Kieran and I. It had gotten to the point where I was depending more on Mom and Arthur's advice than on Dad's. In contrast to Sarah, Arthur was actively involved in my wedding preparations. Because of this, even Arthur appeared surprised by Sarah's request, or rather, her demand, and was unsure of how to react. When Mom finally stated that Arthur would love to do it, he continued to stare at her. I work in corporate, where terrible calls are almost a given, but that had to be one of the worst calls I've ever been on. Dad was crying. He began cursing out Arthur instead of discussing it with Sarah, and then hung up. And that was all. I didn't ask Dad how he was feeling, but I'm sure the others did. I quickly hung up the phone since I had too many other things to think about. Besides, this wasn't my problem. He didn't want to renege on the commitment he had made to Sarah. It was between them if she broke it. I didn't want or intend to step in. They were able to resolve it among themselves. I wasn't interested in becoming involved in trivial family matters at this time. I had no idea that it would soon cause me great annoyance. A few hours after his little princess dealt him a heartbreaking blow, Dad called me last night in tears. On the phone, he was crying and telling me that he would love to walk me down the aisle now and that he was foolish for turning down my offer. I was shocked by what I heard. It was astonishing how entitled they were. Although I was sorry for what had transpired, I gently explained to him that it was between him and Sarah. It had no bearing whatsoever on my wedding plans. I informed him that this had been decided months prior and that Finn was escorting me down the aisle. I also informed him that I was unable to make a last-minute modification. He promised to speak with Finn, saying that I didn't need to be concerned about Finn's disagreement because Finn was merely a placeholder for him. I explained to him that I didn't want to hurt Finn, not that he agreed. Dad didn't need to know that I didn't want him to be my father in the first place. I informed Dad that no swap was taking place, despite his insistence that he speak with Finn and make amends. The final step was for Finn to lead me down the aisle. He believed I was resisting because Finn wouldn't resign, and he was living in total denial. He was sure he could persuade Finn not to do it. After hanging up, I called Finn right away to let him know what was happening. It would be an understatement to say that Finn was furious. I informed him that I had always wanted him to be the one to reveal my identity when he asked what I wanted. Only at his encouragement did I ask Dad in the first place, and he was the first person I had asked. I replied in the affirmative when Finn asked if I was certain I wanted him to lead me down the aisle. Then he assured me that if Dad phoned him, he would correct him and that I shouldn't worry about anything. Since his favorite had sent him out, I told Finn that I didn't want any drama at the wedding and that Dad needed to realize that he couldn't just walk in anytime he wanted and use me as a stand-in daughter. Finn reassured me that there would be no alteration to the wedding arrangements and that he would make sure Dad knew about it. I haven't spoken to one of them since last evening. I'm getting so anxious about it. I truly don't have the energy to handle this turmoil at this time, and everything was going smoothly. I'm not sure if I should get in touch with them or hold off until I find out what transpired between Finn and Dad. I'm not even sure whether Finn has had a conversation with him yet. The anxiousness is making me queasy, and I'm at a loss for what to do. Update 1. Finn and I eventually spoke, and the situation is a complete mess, even worse than I had anticipated. Fortunately, he has taken care of the majority of it, so I won't have any issues. Finn claimed that he had been expecting a call from Dad to talk about the alleged change in plans, but the call never arrived. Finn recognized then that Dad was not going to talk about anything. Dad reasoned that since he had made the decision to accompany me down the aisle, everyone else must have agreed. After waiting a day for Dad to get in touch, Finn called him. Because I had mentioned something, he asked Dad if the arrangements had changed. In an attempt to appear casual, Dad said that because Sarah would no longer be walking me down the aisle, I had requested him to do so. Now, Finn, the more reasonable and level-headed of the three of us, is typically diplomatic. I was shocked to hear that he went completely crazy on Dad. Finn claimed that since they both knew I hadn't requested Dad to accompany me down the aisle, he urged him to stop being so rude. Rather, Dad had pleaded for the part after his beloved daughter had turned him down. Dad was enraged to hear this. When faced with the truth or anything he doesn't want to hear, he has a tendency to react violently. Finn, however, told Dad to stop talking and listen for once before he could interfere. Finn stated that considering how he had treated me over the years, Dad should be thankful that he was even receiving an invitation to my wedding. Then Finn relaxed. He later expressed regret to me for snapping at Dad, particularly so near the wedding, but he said he was unable to control himself. Finn longed for Dad to see his true self and shed the mask he was wearing. Finn admitted to Dad that he had always given preference to Sarah and had, at most, tried to get along with Finn, but I was never given any thought. In addition, he brought up the fact that I had requested Finn to accompany me down the aisle. I had only asked Dad at first because of Finn's persistence. Finn stated that he had thought Dad would use the occasion to begin repairing our relationship, but Dad squandered his opportunity. Finn said that none of his kids liked or respected Dad, calling him a failure of a father. Because Finn wasn't a fair parent, he didn't respect him. He never made an effort to love me or treat me like his daughter, therefore I didn't respect him. Sarah also didn't respect him since she wouldn't have pulled the prank she did if she did. Finn went on to claim that Dad was the source of Sarah's conceited demeanor. After years of lavishing her with attention, he was now having to deal with the fallout. Finn claimed that since Dad had been throwing out his other children since they were born, it was only fitting that his favorite child would throw out his favorite. Finn told me that although he didn't remember everything because he had shouted in a blinding passion, he did admit that he had spoken more. He reassured me that I didn't have to be concerned about Dad pulling any tricks after he got a harsh reality check. And Finn would take care of it right away if he did. Finn also clarified that the plans remained unchanged. He wouldn't alter the fact that he would be the one to lead me down the aisle. I was more than grateful that he apologized for the drama so close to the wedding. I've never been able to defend myself with such strength in my life. I always believed that I might have done something wrong for Dad to not love me. Over the years, I made an effort to get over that emotion, but I was never successful. Here I had my brother standing up for me, which I never thought anyone would do. When we were children, my mother ought to have defended me, but she didn't. She never challenged Dad, but she made an effort to compensate for the lack of affection in her own manner. Her diffidence and deference to him gave me the impression that I would never be able to confront him about how awful he was to me, though I don't blame her for it. But only because my brother loved me so much that he could no longer stand the idea of my going through this did that change. I was choking when I told him that this was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever done for me, and I was crying by the time he finished recounting the entire episode. It must be the greatest thing I could ever hope for, but I doubt Finn understands the extent of what he has done. Second update, I'm married now. In fact, Kieran and I are presently enjoying our honeymoon in Thailand after getting married a few days ago. Despite some turmoil beforehand, the wedding went off without a hitch. Dad couldn't walk even one daughter down the aisle, and Finn wasn't going to back down. The situation has become really bad. Dad was primarily worried about how his extended family would perceive him if he did not attend the weddings of both children. During his conversation with Finn, he kept returning to this subject. Once more, Finn bluntly informed him that he was emotionally checked out with me anyway, thus he was missing the role of father at least for my wedding. Finn advised him to express gratitude for the invitation in the first place. Since Sarah was his favorite, Dad could only wonder what went wrong with her, and no one truly knows why she did what she did. When word came out, Sarah had the gall to phone me and claim that it was unjust to Dad and that I wanted him to walk me down the aisle because she couldn't. Since she was using Dad's money to pay for her wedding and had expelled him, I encouraged her to have a life. I informed her that I had visited Dad and that, due to some foolish pledge she was unable to keep, he had decided to accompany her down the aisle. She was more than welcome to change things up at her wedding if she was so offended by her beloved father's misery. Since she was feeling awful about Dad, I assured her that Arthur would understand and that I could even speak with him on her behalf. She ended the call since she had nothing more to say. Before the wedding, I called Finn and informed him that I didn't want to be involved in any more father drama. If it came to me, it was his duty to make sure I was finished with this bullshit. I couldn't allow Dad to ruin my day because I had 100 other things to be happy about or worried about. I couldn't allow him to ruin my most memorable day because he had already made me miserable for most of my life. Finn assured me that he would handle everything and that I shouldn't worry. It would be an understatement to say that I was really anxious on my wedding day, but fortunately, everything went smoothly. I'm glad Dad didn't try to start anything, even though he appeared to be rather glum. After a point, I was too preoccupied with having fun to give his pouty face much thought. It was awkward between them, and Sarah tried to avoid Dad as much as possible, but I didn't mind. I'm happy that nobody was able to ruin the wedding because it went off without a hitch. I could feel Dad glaring daggers at my back as Finn led me down the aisle, but that was all he could do. According to what I've been informed, Dad has been left to handle some damage control after a few people questioned why Finn was up there instead of him. That's his cross to carry, then. In order to live a peaceful existence and eliminate any possibility of turmoil, I also want Sarah's wedding to be over. I'm going to cut off communication with Dad for the foreseeable future after her wedding. In any case, I don't see the need to keep in contact with him. Update 2. Yesterday was Sarah's wedding. She didn't ask Kieran and me to the wedding, so I wouldn't know how it went. I'm not sure what she was trying to accomplish, but I was more than willing to watch. It was just Mom, Arthur, and Dad there, and to her dismay, Finn did not go either. At the last minute, Dad reportedly hoped she would change her mind and ask him to lead her down the aisle, but that never occurred. It was quite unpleasant, and it's clear from the pictures she shared that Arthur would much rather be somewhere else. Mom is just finished, Dad is glum, and Arthur is uneasy. I don't really care, but aside from that, her wedding went smoothly. I was called up by Mom to provide these details. Naturally, Dad is unhappy because he had hoped that at least one of us would give in and allow him to do as he pleases. Now, however, his personal life is in disarray and all of his children are essentially cut off from him. I don't care that he isn't handling it well. For being such a bad father to me, allowing me to have a miserable childhood, and even helping to cause it, I genuinely believe it serves him right. I've had enough of him, and I don't want Sarah's or his poison to affect this new stage of my life or my new family. I'm relieved they're no longer in my life. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My daughter was invited to perform at her cousin's wedding but was later smeared online because her performance drew more attention than the bride. My F49 cousin, F23, asked my daughter, F16, to perform at her wedding reception, but became bitter upon seeing the positive reception to her act. She has since posted about her online, and my daughter is considering quitting original post. I hope this is okay to share here. The reason I'm posting is because of my daughter who's been hurting in the aftermath of a recent performance. I'm sorry in advance for how long this turned out, but any advice from fellow aerialists would be greatly appreciated. My cousin Dana, not real name, had her wedding 2 weeks ago, and she asked if my daughter could perform at her reception. My daughter, Jane, also fake name, has practiced Silk's lyra for the past few years at a nearby circus studio, and she's also performed with through the studio at small gigs. She hopes to continue into adulthood and become a professional teacher, but this recent incident has shaken her confidence. She has a private Instagram to document her progress performances, and I only post certain performances on my Facebook. Her first gig with the studio and her first recital, to name a few we're proud of. Some of our relatives saw her performances through my socials, and they watched her perform at her studio's Christmas recital when we hosted Christmas at our home a few years back. Something that surprised her when they visited early to see her. I love how they coordinated that, and Jane said it was her loudest cheering section to date. Dana was one of the relatives who came up early to see her Christmas recital, and she's always been super supportive. She asked me if Jane would be willing to perform at the reception, and I asked on her behalf. Jane was honored and excited when I did, and we already had a portable rig for her too. Though we ended up renting a taller one from her studio. Dana got the idea from a YouTube video featuring an aerialist who performed at a wedding reception, and she showed us while requesting white silks and a white outfit. We scoped out the venue and purchased white silks along with a white costume that Dana approved of, and Jane was really excited throughout. Jane even worked on choreography to a song that Dana requested, and she put a lot of time into it, even asking one of her coaches to help her with it. Dana insisted on paying her for the gig despite Jane not expecting to be paid, and she paid her a few hundred. However, Dana's had a change of heart. Jane received a standing ovation after her performance that surprised her, but we didn't know anything was wrong until Dana went on Facebook a few days later. Dana said she didn't approve of the outfit Jane wore and that she specifically told her to not wear white. She also said my husband and I pressured her to have Jane perform and that the performance gave off an unclassy vibe, lies that my husband and I couldn't believe. We sent Dana numerous costume links, and we purchased the one she liked. There was also nothing wrong with Jane's performance. Dana was one of the people cheering afterwards. Jane received nothing but compliments afterward, but I'm disgusted that she had to see that post after all the work she put into it. The post also had comments disabled for what it's worth. I called Dana to confront her about the lies, but she didn't pick up numerous calls. I then called her parents who, like us, had received messages about her post, and they said that Dana was wrong. They apologized on her behalf and said they were also disgusted. Dana's mom also said that Dana vented to her before making her post a few days after the reception. Dana told her she regretted asking Jane to perform given the attention, compliments and cheers she received for it. Her mom also said that she felt upstaged with Jane wearing white and having to hear how good she was. Dana's parents tried to call her after she made her post, but she didn't answer after their previous conversation ended with her parents telling her she shouldn't be bitter because she specifically asked Jane to perform. Dana's parents reported the post along with us/others, and we've told the truth to those who reached out along with a post to explain our side, stand up for Jane. We have text proof of sending costume links that Dana chose from. Dana's parents also requested to talk to Jane on the phone to apologize for Dana's behavior, and my husband and I told Jane that Dana was wrong, and that we'll be distancing ourselves from Dana permanently. Dana's parents were surprised at her behavior, and we were too, having seen her grow up. Granted, we only see extended family for Thanksgiving and Christmas because we live far, but other relatives were surprised too as it seemed to come from left field. Maybe there's a side of Dana we'll never know from our limited holiday, milestone interactions, but our focus is Jane. We've tried to cheer Jane up by offering to take her to dinner among other activities, but she's been hurting, which is why I'm here. Jane hasn't practiced, at home or the studio, since the reception. And I don't want to invade her space at her studio by telling anyone there, in case she doesn't want anyone to know. She asked me to return the white silks and costume after being so excited to receive them. She also said she's going to take an extended break from aerial photography to reconsider if she wants to continue. Aside from aerial photography, she's taken a break from seeing non-aerial friends too, choosing to pretty much keep to herself. We would appreciate any advice from fellow aerialists on how to lift her spirits. We remind her of how we're proud of her, along with the many compliments she received, but she's asked for space and to not talk about it. We're going to respect that and let time do its thing, but we'll consider any advice from other aerialists who can relate to the time and work she put in. Sorry for this being so long, but we appreciate anyone who reads and takes the time to reply. Comments from the first post. Some meat with skin. This is a rare story on this site where everyone, except the villain, does everything right. If this happened to an adult or even an older teenager, she would probably still be hurt, but be able to see that Dana is the one with the issue. But at 16, she's still forming her idea of herself. It sounds like she's taking this all on as a reflection of herself. I'm not someone who can be in the spotlight. My desire to perform hurts my family. I would really consider therapy. You could say all the right things to her, and I bet you have, but at 16 it's hard to hear your mom. Alternatively, and I'm sorry to say this, but is it possible that Dana's new husband gave Jane any inappropriate attention? That might explain why Dana is so upset when she presumably should have known exactly what to expect, although certainly wouldn't excuse it. If there were any opportunities for Jane and the new husband to be alone, I would really look into that also, because it would also explain why Jane hasn't practiced since the reception even though the drama started a few days later. It is an extreme place to go, but I would just ask yourself if there was an opportunity for him to be inappropriate because she is withdrawing from her entire social life. When I was a teenager, driving up to the next city helped me sometimes. Want to take a drive? Is still a question I ask myself when I feel stuck and hopeless. Go to the big aquarium and get cannolis at the outlet mall or something equally random. Maybe she'll open up or get out of her head, or maybe y'all will just have a nice day. Lots of love to you and your family. Mistral 19. Jealousy is horrible, and Dana has just made herself look bad to anyone that came to the wedding. Also, just for reference, I have performed at multiple weddings and have always had a white costume. It suits the theme and is no way comparable to a wedding dress. Leslie Barbnope. I always see aerialists in white at weddings. Take comfort in the internet OP, and hopefully they can use it as a defense with Dana. If she wants to be that way, just post the receipts of how she asked her what to wear, etc. if she's willing to say that for a 16-year-old. Or let it go, it'll pass, because I promise Dana will have some new crazy thing to do very soon. These types always do. Chelsea Sphere 89. The bride is petty, immature and ridiculous. First off, you must see that. Help her see it too if she doesn't already. When people show you who they are, listen. This is a painful, but valuable lesson that your daughter is learning very early in her performance teaching career. Just like any obstacle or difficulty in life standing between us and the things we desire, she has the choice to either let it beat her down, or let it lift her up and make more determined than ever. If she truly wants this and does eventually go on to be an aerial coach and/or performer, she will face even more challenges. This is only serving to prepare her to face those. Making art is vulnerable. Sometimes people won't like it. But that tells you more about them than about you most of the time. We'll love dogs. Dana wanted her wedding to be all about her, which is fair to an extent, but obviously not to this extent, and I think she was happy to have a beautiful performance done for her, but forgot that people will congratulate the performer, rather than the person who hired the performer. Given how extreme the response was, I would be a bit worried what someone else mentioned about the outside chance that Dana's husband said did something inappropriate, but my guess, and hope, is it's just a general attention thing. Regardless, it sounds like you and Dana's parents are handling things as best you can. Defending your daughter but respecting her privacy and boundaries sounds exactly like the right thing to do. Well done you. I would just continue to be there for your daughter in a low-pressure way and make sure she knows she has safe people to talk to whenever she's ready. Maybe see if there are any non-aerial activities any of her friends are down to do with her. Maybe something like rock climbing, which can feel less performance-oriented and attention-grabbing but can still feel fun for an aerialist because there's a fair amount of strength crossover. Hopefully she'll be comfortable with aerial photography again in future, but I think just trying to help her not socially withdraw too much would be good for her well-being for now. So sorry she's going through this. She sounds like a great kid and a very talented aerialist. Update. Before I get into what's happened since my last post, I want to thank everyone who took the time to comment. 2 pieces of advice really stood out, and I'll get to them shortly. Since my original post, Dana's Facebook post is gone. I don't know if she deleted it or enough people reported it for Facebook to remove it, but we're glad it's gone. She never apologized to us, or Jane, or even bothered to call, so our position on being permanently done with Dana stands. My husband and I made a post on my Facebook addressing the lies she spewed about our daughter, and we shared photo proof of Dana's text where she approved of Jane's white costume from links we sent, not to mention the song choice she sent us too. Better yet, Dana's mother reposted it on her account, which really surprised me. Dana's mother wrote that they loved Jane's act and that they disapproved of Dana's actions. My husband and I also made sure that Jane was okay with us addressing it on Facebook, and she said it was fine. Normally, I wouldn't use Facebook to address drama if aimed at me, but since this involves a grown adult attacking a minor, we felt the need to address it publicly because she disparaged her publicly, and Jane will remember whether we stood up for her or not years from now. I had a chance to speak with Dana's mother since my original post on the phone, and she spoke to Dana again after our last call. Dana reiterated how she regretted asking Jane to perform, but she harped on the standing ovation that bothered her the most. Dana told her that she expected Jane to get some polite applause, but that the overwhelming response really set her over the edge because she expected the loudest cheers to be when she and her husband entered the reception, but that went to Jane instead. Dana and her husband also received a great reception when they entered the reception, but Jane's performance did too, and Dana didn't expect it. Heck, even Jane was surprised by it too. She never received a standing ovation from a solo act before. But Dana's mother believes that if Dana had asked someone to sing who received a similar reception, Dana's jealousy would have been all the same. Someone suggested seeing if Jane would be interested in speaking to a therapist given how hurtful Dana's comments could be for a teen, and Jane said she's open to it so long as it isn't a counselor at school because, as of now, she doesn't want anyone at school or her studio to know about the incident, and she vaguely told the coach who helped her choreograph that it went fine. We will respect her privacy request as it's her right to control the narrative. But in the same vein, I suggested therapy for Dana to Dana's mother since her reaction might be a bigger insecurity, and she said she'd ask. The other thing someone suggested was the possibility of Dana's husband, or anyone, making an inappropriate comment to Jane during the reception that made her shut down and not want to see friends or practice days before Dana's post. My husband decided to ask her, and Jane said no when he did. If something happened, perhaps she'd be more comfortable telling a therapist with time. But on the bright side, she said she might want to try a different aerial studio because she doesn't want to answer questions about how it went, or share a video, at her home studio, so we will help her find somewhere new as she asked. We hope she doesn't permanently leave her current studio because she has friends and coaches who are supportive, and she performs with that studio's troupe at festivals gigs. But I personally understand the need to sometimes go somewhere where nobody knows you for a break, and we hope that that will help her. She hasn't said definitely yet. But if we do, we'll take her. She still wants an extended break from aerial photography in the meantime. But even if or when she goes back, she said she may never want to perform again and would rather do it leisurely, one of the reasons she doesn't want to return to her home studio where she's a part of their troupe. She asked if we'd tell her troupe coach that she won't perform with them anymore if it comes to it. And if that's what she wants down the road, then we will. Hopefully time heals this wound and helps her at least keep the friends she has there, but we can only hope. Comments from the update. Fluffykins_pie. I'm so glad that you and the rest of the family are backing Jane up as much as possible. Hopefully the support you show her now will eventually win out over Dana's hateful behavior. I also hope that Dana actually gets therapy, because going after a minor like that was beyond out of line. Maybe the suggestion coming from her own mom will make Dana reevaluate and make some changes. But regardless, it sounds like you guys are doing a great job parenting. I'm so sorry this happened, but the absolute best thing you can do is just keep showing Jane that you have her back and it's her decision what she decides to do from here. We'd be happy to have her back if and when she decides to return to the aerial community. Half Angel. I can see the positives in here that have happened since the last post. Thank you for updating. I have been thinking of you all. It does sound like Jane is still blaming herself and that will need unlocking as that mindset could spill over into other aspects of her life, stopping her achieving her full potential. She needs to realize that this is bridezilla jealousy that got directed towards her, nothing to do with her, and if an aunt had received that attention it too would have got squashed. Perhaps angling her to perform is fine, just never a family wedding again. And please ask her again in a few weeks' time if any inappropriate comments were made or done. Sometimes it can take a while to feel comfortable enough to say it out loud. It's not uncommon for boys to take 30 years before they say something. I feel like her coach needs to know that the performance was amazing, but to know that there was fallout afterwards. They don't need to know exactly, but it will help explain the actions and ease the road back there for Jane. Please give her a big hug from me. Now to the next story, story 2. I child-proofed for my in-laws visit, but my husband thought I was overreacting. Now he's gone further after day 1 with our nephew. Original post, I am at 26F, and my husband is 29M. We have been married for 5 years and we went to Berlin right after marriage since we both found really well-paying jobs. Meanwhile both of our families, parents, siblings etc., still live back in Greece and we usually visit back occasionally. Now me and my husband don't have any children and we don't plan to have any. We enjoy buying expensive things and experiencing things we never got to as children, such as nice furniture in our home, going to exotic restaurants with friends, travel, hobbies, and generally just our lives with each other exactly the way it is. But that's just how my husband thinks. His family is very traditional and every married couple has at least one kid. This time my husband invited my Bill and CL to visit us with their 3-year-old son for 2 weeks. This would be the first time they've traveled with their son and the first time we would be hosting our nephew at our home. Now our nephew is known to be going through the terrible twos and has been throwing tantrums and breaking things lately, so I did some childproofing in our home a day before my in-laws were due to arrive. I removed all the glass and ceramic decor. I swapped out our linen tablecloth for a plastic one. I locked up our intoxication devices. I also covered our sofas with a plushy fabric cover. Our sofa's fabric is white cashmere, because my nephew likes to snack while watching TV and we can always take it outside and dust off food crumbs. I also changed my maid's schedule to come in 5 days a week instead of 3 so she can help prepare breakfast and make sure the house is tidy. However, when my husband saw all of my changes, he kind of got upset. He told me he felt that I was preparing our house as if we were hosting messy and uncivilized people. And asked me why I don't make these changes when our friends in Berlin who have kids come over for dinner. He also said that he's never seen our friends make these sorts of changes in their own home for their kids. I don't understand this comparison at all. Coming over for dinner for 3 hours and staying at a place for a couple of weeks is very different. And we've visited our in-laws enough to see how chaotic their home can get to the point where my Bill and SIL keep mostly plastic items in their homes for convenience. AITA. Top comments. Tulip afternoon, NTA. Instead of worrying the entire visit that their kid could ruin something expensive, the visiting parents can rest assured that the space has been child-proofed. As long as all the changes don't make the space uncomfortable, for example squeaky plastic couch covers or all decor being hidden so the place is bare, I think it makes a lot of sense. You are making the visit less stressful for everyone. Horror reveal 7618. He told me he felt that I was preparing our house as if we were hosting messy and uncivilized people. He's quoting the definition of a toddler here. OOP is voted NTA Update 1. Same post. Edit. We hadn't spoken since we had our fight last night and my in-laws are supposed to be landing in the morning. My husband brought food from a restaurant I liked and told me he wanted to apologize. He told me he overreacted because he wasn't admitting to himself how different his brother is as a person ever since he became a dad and that his life is going in a very different direction with more financial hardships too, and that makes him angry and helpless. He told me he misdirected his frustration at me and thought what I did was really nice, especially since he is more finicky than I am. I tried my best to make him feel not guilty and responsible for the lives and decisions of other grown-ups. But I'm so relieved he came around on his own. Update 2. Same post. Edit 2. So guys, it's officially day 1 of the in-laws visit and my husband has now gone an extra step and put away most of the lamps in our house because they are glass and super dangerous for a toddler to be around. We have about 35 'cause we hate ceiling lights. When we picked up our in-laws from the airport and were driving them back, my nephew accidentally poured a bag of chips all over the back seat and floor mats. Everyone just laughed, but I know my husband was horrified inside and now he's been vacuuming the backseat area for 2 hours now, LOL. Oh, and in-laws super appreciated our baby proofing. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.